Hey everyone, this is a clip from a recent episode of Another Pass, where we talk about movies and all the struggles that go into making them. If you like it, check out the whole podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Before we get too deep into this movie, because I had a lot of thoughts when watching it this time in this circumstance. At this point in my life, because we've talked a lot about how the franchise hits different now than it did even 5 years ago in terms of some of the stuff that we see. But Paul, I do want to ask, like, what is the starting point for your interest in this franchise? Like, what is your experience of the franchise as a whole? Like you said, you're aggressively into it, which I relate. But
yeah,
like, do you remember when you first were introduced to it? How you were introduced to it?
Yeah, I got a lot of science fiction from my dad as a kid, so that's where Star Trek comes from, and this and Lost in Space. I didn't quite glom onto Lost in Space with the fervor of Star Trek and Apes, but I got a lot from him. So from a very young age, this franchise was in my life, and because the three of us were not alive when these movies were coming out, so it was already a thing. So you could always just digest the whole package at once. It was like the original Star Wars movies, where by the time I was old enough to appreciate them, the three of them were out already and had been dormant for a while. So you could kind of take it as a whole and stuff. But no kids in my class or anything were watching those things. Nobody was watching, Star Wars because it was old at that time. We're talking pre, Lucas fiddling with them era. And no one was watching Planet of the Apes because it had been ages. But I had a Cornelius doll in my room just up there next to the Mego, Captain Kirk and Cornelius and stuff, and it was very representative to these two franchises, which, by the way, share a lot of kinship with each other in that they came out around the same time. I mean, Star Trek starts up in 66 for real. Apes starts filming in 67. And they're both smart pieces of science fiction that have just that little edge of low budgety to it. We're not talking 2001 here, although I would argue the apes in Planet of the Apes look way better than the apes in 2001, but there's an element of camp, it's just on the periphery, but it's smart enough where you don't feel like a dum-dum for enjoying it, and actually probably set the tone for a lot of what I enjoy in media just in general. It's like having something to say, but doing it in an over-the-top kind of arguably ridiculous at times way, with intricate continuity. So that checks all my boxes. Right off. Just
are there time travel shenanigans? Yes. Like, is headcanon required to understand the franchise? Yeah.
Check. And that leads to comic books and all that. So that's sort of the basis for my media consumption just in general. And then, like a lot of kids, I put down these franchises when I was in middle school because I didn't want to get beat up. But then in high school, I really found myself like embracing these things. Like I had pictures of Admiral Kirk on my locker kind of thing. But I was able to feel like I owned it sort of in a weird way. And the same thing with Apes. So as an adult, I've just grown to love these franchises more and more because they age so well. I mean, obviously we'll talk about how this movie doesn't exactly pass the Bechdel test, but that aside, like they still hold up pretty damn well, this and Star Trek. So that's where I come at Apes. And so I love them dearly and go through periods of watching them, and was so impressed when those Matt Reeves movies, and well, I guess I forget who directed that Rise movie, but I was so impressed when those movies came out because I could not believe, speaking of intricate continuity, that of all the things they could pick up, they pick up the story of Caesar from 4 and 5. I was so impressed with that decision. I was just like, oh my God, because not only are they picking it up, but they did it in this really interesting, unique way. I don't know. I was just really, really impressed with. So that's my Apes background, and I make a lot of monkey noises, and my wife can't stand it.
Remember, if you like that clip, check out the podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.